So I served on the city council in 2011, and Walter Bailey, who was a county commissioner at the time, he wrote to all the council members, and he wrote to us about the fact that we had 3 parks in the city of Memphis in pretty prominent positions that were named for leaders in the Confederate Army. Myron Lowry, of course, served as chairman of the Memphis City Council for many years and was one of the long-serving members of the council, decided to try to do something about it. So Myron Lowry proposed renaming one of the parks, do kind of a combination. So it would be the Nathan Bedford Forrest Park / Ida B. Wells Park. Of course, Ida B. Wells is someone who has a long history in the city of Memphis. She was a journalist.
But what an awkward way to have to position that, or
I agree. So I did not support his initiative, so that's why I did, right? So that's why I filed my own resolution. So his resolution was a compromise measure, and again, he was trying to, really bring people together. And my resolution, the one that ultimately passed, said we should just rename all the parks, and we should just rename them after some generic name. So that's how the conversation started. Sons of Confederate Veterans came down to City Hall, and they were upset, to say the least. And they strutted in the City Hall and told us that we could not disturb history as they saw it, and that we could not do anything to disturb those parks, to change their names, and so forth. And they brought a lot of folks with them. And in fact, they gave us a long lecture. Me, a freshman member of the City Council, a lot of veterans, including Janice Fuller-Love. I remember her being there as they presented their testimony. And they told us how slavery was good for African Americans, how it provided jobs and access to the economy for African Americans, and that it wasn't so bad after all. And we should be grateful for this period in American history. And, these were really hard things to hear. Janice Fuller-Love, my colleague on the city council, of course, broke down into tears. I got riled up, right, around this issue. This is not an issue that I cared much about, even though I'd lived in Memphis my entire life. I just hadn't much noticed these parks and their names. However, listening to how they interpreted it, and again, this is probably not all of Sons of Confederate Veterans. I'm just talking about the folks that made a presentation on that day, got me riled up. I made a proposal, which was supported ultimately by the council, to rename all 3 of those Confederate parks and to try to pick pretty plain vanilla names for those Confederate parks. And we were able, after a lot of debate and a lot of uproar, to ultimately get those parks renamed, but not without significant uproar. So we had all sorts of real racist organizations descend on our town. The KKK had a massive rally. It was discussed in the USA Today and the New York Times. We had all sorts of public safety concerns. My wife was beside herself at the threats that I received during this period of time. I actually grew a gold teeth and kind of changed the way I looked. Now, we received more emails on that than probably any other issue. So, hundreds and hundreds of emails a day, and just, lots of threats for disturbing these parks. And, there are lots of real followers of kind of Nathan Bedford Forrest and the Confederacy. And so this was a real threat, or at least it was seen as a real threat to some of what they had been standing for a very long time.
Was that your wife's idea, or?
Well, I think the threats. I mean, we were just trying to change up my look some because, I was kind of out there with the park renaming. It doesn't seem like a big deal now because now we move way past that. But at the time, we renamed the parks, and at the time, at no point during that time did anyone believe we could rename those parks. At no point. This was so outside of what people thought could happen in our city that it was not even believed. The state started to hear about some of these efforts to do something about these Confederate parks. And when the state heard of these concerns, the state started to make news around an effort to stop the city from having that power. If the state hadn't done that, the city council would not have rushed to vote to change those names. The city council was not poised to vote to support the initiative to change those park names. We had a proposal, we filed it, so forth and so on. It was not going to pass. That is the reality. There's 13 people on the city council. There were not 7 votes to rename the park names at that time. There just were not 7 votes. But when the state decided that it was going to take this power from the city, that proved to be a unifying force, and we all rallied together and said, well, we can't let the state do this to us, so the state became the villain. And it really galvanized the members of the city council into action. And so, we got to vote. We got to vote to change the names.
You were sort of out on an island at that point.
Oh, listen, this was Walter Bailey by himself for a long time. Then he got Myron Lowry by himself. That is it, right? That is it, right? That is it. And they were pushing this issue and so forth. And I wasn't even a part of it until we got the presentation from the Sons of Confederate Veterans. And then, for sure, that I wanted to make sure that I did what I could to be a part of this leadership and their leadership. So it wasn't like the Take It Down movement. The Take Them Down movement is very different, where you have elected officials on your side, you've got people all over the state on your side. There's been a national conversation around what to do about some of these Confederate namesakes. That didn't exist when we renamed the parks. When we renamed the parks, there was nobody, almost nobody, on the side of renaming those parks. We saw Mitch Langer, who was a former mayor of New Orleans, for example, take down some Confederate statues. We saw what happened in Charlottesville as well. So there are efforts all over America. And so, it's a good thing that Memphis has caught up. Thanks to the effort of really community-driven. So the first time I went to a Take Them Down movement, I knew it was community-driven because I saw 300 citizens in a room, and they weren't led by an elected official. There was no elected official to be seen. They were led by, grassroots activists. I saw Tammy Sawyer, who's now on the county commission, at the forefront of those meetings, hosting those meetings, and that was completely grassroots-driven, which is, by the way, this is extremely tough work, right? When I'm on the Memphis City Council, I've got a platform, I've got staff, I've got people that can help to drive some of these initiatives. As a grassroots activist, the people that led Take Them Down, Tammy Sawyer, Earl Fisher, and others, really faced their own kind of struggles because, remember, they don't have a platform, a formal platform. They don't have any staff. They don't have any budgetary allocation, and they don't have any formal power. They have to try as best they can to persuade people to come together to get something done. And fortunately, they were able to get it done. It shows that Memphis is changing really fast. So one of the problems I've always had with Memphis and Shelby County is I believe the citizens are too passive, and we just kind of take it, right? You want to shut down a school in our neighborhood and blight our neighborhood, whatever. We'll just take it. But, and there's all sorts of ways we see this, right? But the Take Them Down movement proved solidly that we are a community that is willing to speak up for the public interest, and we're willing to get something done. I think it's a real turning point in our community, and if people are willing to speak up and stand for something, stand for the public interest, then I think they'll be able to bend government and politics to the will of the people.
Yo, Memphis ain't ready for a style, cause our time is now. Known for rocking crowds with a gap to smile, homie. M-City, we get it, our lane's way different. Restricted 1960 lyrics. They want a Jim Crow, the kids flow, but kids know love ain't got a color. We born to flow with the rainbow. We go where the pain go. Bandage raps, we stack these facts on tracks like Pringles. Muddy waters from the optic of the stepdaughter hip-hop. Cinderella men, heavyweight boxers from remain humble cause we paying our dues. Residing in the home of soul and blues. We young cats with so much hunger to prove. Cause we the leaders of the new school. Always remain humble cause we paying our dues. Residing in the home of soul and blues. We young cats with so much hunger to prove. Cause we the leaders of the new school.